Hello again, everyone. My name is David Bastel, alongside OREA President David Oikel, and this is the Real Estate Edition podcast. Fall is here. Well, it's almost here, and we have an outstanding episode talking standard forms with Cassandra Agnew Walker, who is the head of standard forms, and Kelly Billings, who is the senior manager, standard forms projects and communications. David, forms talk is always very informative.
Absolutely, Dave. Whenever we survey our members, standard forms is either the first or second most valuable member service that they talk about. So interest in standard forms is always high. There's lots to learn. There's lots to talk about. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
And we also talked to them about a new exciting project they have on the go. So let's get to that conversation right now with Cassandra and Kelly.
You're listening to this month's episode of The Real Estate Edition with host Dave Bastel and OREA President David Oikel.
Really looking forward to this conversation. Lots to get to here. First, some introductions. Can you start off, Cassandra, by telling the listeners about yourselves? And Kelly, we'll get you to describe and explain everything you do as well.
That's great. Thank you. I'm the senior manager of Standard Forms Projects and Communications. I support the team with project management, analytics, budgeting, member engagement, and various other projects related to expanding our forms resources for members. I've been working with OREA approximately 3 years now, so I'm fairly new. I had worked in professional development with a local board for about 12 years. But when I heard that OREA had a position opening, I jumped at the chance to apply because OREA had a great reputation as an employer. And it's been an absolute pleasure evolving in my role ever since.
Cassandra?
And she's been a pleasure to work with. We have a passionate forms team of about 5 staff members. And I say about because we have a few halves. We draw from other department areas as well. And they're super help. That's been a real growth for the standard forms activities. So my role at OREA is head of standard forms, which means pretty much anything forms and clauses comes my way, from being a direct liaison on the standard forms committee, implementing annual updates, working with our third-party licensees and legal team. Forms is one of the primary services to members that OREA offers, and there's many staff contributing to delivering the many resources that we have, from outreach sessions, webinars, vital memos and FAQs, Forms Explain library, just to mention a few, and I'm pretty much hands-on on all of those. And having enjoyed a background of over 30 years in real estate selling, I'd say my most favorite part of my role at OREA is responding and connecting with our boards, associations, brokerages, and individual members, particularly when they have questions, suggestions, and discussions. So that's sort of in a nutshell, I guess both of us, where we're at with the association.
Your team oversees all the forms and clauses that come out of OREA. How many forms and clauses are actually available to members?
Well, David, there are currently 210 standard forms and over 300 clauses. We provide these in both English and French.
And I would add, David, we realize most members, and I'm sure even in your trading activity, you wouldn't use 200 forms. Most of them would only use a few dozen forms in the period of a year. However, of course, because we're providing templates for members across the province, and members across the province are trading in all sorts of property types and even all sorts of real estate negotiations. So it kind of warrants ongoing monitoring, but many, many forms that we provide.
Yeah, certainly. So the real reason we brought you both on the show today is because you're starting a really exciting project that we want to definitely promote, because this is a fantastic idea. Cassandra, can you tell us a little bit more about it before we kind of break it down?
Yeah, for sure. Kelly and I together during the pilot and during the show, we respond to member questions, extending much of that into practical discussions. I find that it's really important we emphasize parts of the form, specific content, detailed wording, kind of as reminders to members, given that they're managing so much documentation. Members are faced with many variables in their business, and that includes the variables on the forms and the potential uses. So as mentioned a minute ago, we have many forms, and therefore we have compounding many variables. We do our best to give clear, concise answers. However, I am a little verbose, so we try to keep me on track. And also those in the business are aware real estate situations are rarely black and white or simple in nature. Therefore, we incorporate a few ifs, ands, or buts in our answers while being concise.
So, Kelly, can you tell us your role in the Standard?
I'm the co-host of the series, so I moderate the live questions throughout the broadcast and also bring some background and info to the forum's question discussion, especially if the question will connect with recent events or frequent inquiries that we get. And while I totally enjoy member interaction, I do tend to deflect to Cassandra and our special guests to provide specific forms use, detailed answers on content, or for a summarized best practice.
So that's a great start on this. But, specifically, why did you want to start the Standard?
David, I think this goes back a few years. We constantly are trying to think of ways to communicate with members, first of all, provide them forms of information in a most effective way, something that'll work for many, many members or as many as possible. And due to the last 18, 19 months of the pandemic, virtual communications has become a prime method for almost all members. Personally, if I were to respond to this many years ago, I've always thought it would be great, not reality, but it would be great to be available for members 24/7, to be able to talk with them, help them navigate the forms, the resources, building their knowledge about any form they're using, and to understand, first and foremost, the intended purpose for whatever form they're going to use, and maybe how they need to work with each other, like member to member with the forms. So from that perspective, I think it is a super ongoing, something members can look forward to in our series. In what we're proposing is they'll be able to chime in every week and sort of have those live off the cuff conversations. And that's really what I think has been an aim. Whenever I get a chance to make a phone call, I make a phone call. Connecting with them is probably that primary purpose. As far as the Standard works, it's a nice streamlined methodology to get to members virtually too.
Yeah, and I think that what the last 18 months, as you say, has taught us is that we can communicate with the whole province in a way that we hadn't really considered before. Mm-hmm. I mean, it used to be that we would do stuff in person, and if you were in a big city, we'd come to you and we would deliver stuff. And if you were in a smaller town, you'd either have to drive or not get covered at all. And so I think that this is really a benefit that we can deliver something in an equal way, efficiently to the whole province. And I think that we're all better because of that. So thank you very much for starting this.
Absolutely. If I can add on there, David, a quick little maybe comparison in numbers, we would do 60 to 80 presentations in outreach, getting to large and small communities, and probably, maybe up to 10,000 members. But in this case, not only is it live from getting to similar numbers of members, hopefully more, but they're also recordings. So on top of that, they'll be able to sort of always go back to it if there's a particular topic. So yeah, definitely. And you're welcome. I think it's fantastic. OREA just keeps thinking of more and more different ways of connecting with members. Kelly, did you have anything else on the why part? I know that I kind of took over that part, but I know we've got a few different team issues or team thoughts.
Well, I think that you and David made excellent points there. And it's true that, doing outreach in person was always a really great vehicle for the information, but now doing it on a platform like we are now and having the opportunity, barring the fact that you're not necessarily in reality going to be available 24/7, this really does give a very important opportunity for members to be able to speak to our forms experts like you, Cassandra, and the guests that we have on the show, to be able to get their questions answered in real time, because it's not always a provided opportunity. So also for us, with the addition of getting that feedback from members in real time, we also are able to utilize those questions and comments and feedback to drive us in decision-making when we're working with other forms projects and resources throughout the year.
What were the 4 pilot episodes focused on, and how did you come about selecting these 4?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we always have to decide what might be most valuable to the members. So we do try and go as general as we can, and then we narrow things down as things progress, as you'll see in the 10 episodes that we have for this specific project. So for the pilot, we had over 7 700 members participate, which was fantastic. Our 4 topics were OREA forms for sellers, OREA forms for buyers, forms for brokerage to brokerage communications, as well as forms related to negotiation and sales, which is one of the most important and of interest topics.
So we want to treat the viewers to a sneak peek of what they can expect from the standard. So if it's okay with you, let's do a Q&A here and now. Let's go through some of the live questions that came in from the members when you did the pilot series. You mentioned those, so the ones forms for sellers. So the question was, what OREA forms have we heard a lot of contention about this past 6 to 12 months?
I'll take that one on there, David. I think that we have always got something contentious. We get a lot of good activities as far as what the market's telling us. The situations in the marketplace across the province, they vary, and we have heard more specifically. If I can mention one first, I'll mention a few. The issues around forms collecting sellers' acknowledgement for specific entry or access. This is contentious also and topical with RICO. So members and brokerage trying to manage those documents to get their sellers' acknowledgement around access to the property. The next area of contention connected to a few OREA forms was around collecting seller direction and specific offer directions. The importance of educating sellers about the pros and the cons and the seller giving direction, especially around delaying offer conveyance or offer presentation delayed. Maybe just generally about offers, what's required in an offer before anybody submits to the listing brokerage. And after those 2 areas of contention, before we leave this particular question, I'll clarify those 2 forms that are really specific and honed into the seller acknowledgement for access, which is Form 208, and the Form 244. I think almost everybody knows it by the form number in this case. For the seller direction on offers and really about the property as well. It's not honed in only on the fact that it's offer delayed, but that seems to be what's most contentious. The last area, David, I would say is about getting consent for advertising sold properties. And I know this is probably 12, 15 years in the making, but a few years ago, Standard Forms Committee created a form 170, let me say the form first, it's called consent to advertise. And this is particularly contentious because it's more about obtaining informed consent, which is required, in particular, in order to have RICO or REBA compliance, what the requirements are. Of course, there's privacy, federally, but I think it's honed in around our provincial legislation. So that form has also been a bit contentious, and members just need time to adapt. Sometimes it takes 1 to 3 years. But I'd say those are the 3 areas, David, that are pretty contentious in the last 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I would agree that the no conveyance, the Form 244 is one that everybody is very, very well aware of, and always a question about that, and those questions aren't going away. But
not always happy, sometimes well versed, other times not so happy, not so well versed. But we work on it, right?
Absolutely, thank you.
We will be back after this short break.
Join the OREA Realtor research community to have your say when it comes to the services OREA provides, the recommendations we make to the government, and the strategic priorities of the association. You'll receive exclusive content and be entered into monthly draws every time you complete a survey. Visit joinorearesearch.com to sign up and join an exclusive community of realtors making a difference. joinorearesearch.com.
Let's continue on with the Q&A. Again, these were live questions and are live questions that happen in these episodes. So from episode 2, forms for buyers, the question was, my buyer refuses to sign a buyer representation agreement. How do I proceed?
You know what? That is ongoing. We had a special guest, Hugh Foy, actually, in that particular pilot. So thanks for selecting that one, David. Members can get in a lot of sort of hot water if they wait till the end on one or many forms. And this is one of them, is where you don't introduce the buyer representation front and center. A member may have serious issues because actions often establish relationships. So I think this question about the buyer refusing to sign buyer representation, how do they proceed? Let's hope that conversation is at the beginning of the relationship, the beginning of the services.
Yeah.
Because even worse, if it's at the negotiation point, you're kind of stuck. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think brokerage management advice is really important because you have to go forward based on what that buyer presumes you're servicing them as. But more importantly, I think if I were to take it to the beginning, where hopefully they are having a discussion, there are options of treating buyers as customers. If they don't want buyer client service, which is what the buyer representation's for, then ultimately there hopefully are options as far as the member still providing services, still selling the buyer a property, however, under different circumstances. So what we did in that particular question was sort of reiterate the importance of timing. And David, I'm sure, David Oikel, so I'm calling you both David, but David Oikel, you know how important that buyer representation discussion front and center is so that you don't get into a relationship without actually having clarity at both ends.
Yeah, it is so important. And then also confirming that they're not under contract with somebody else and asking the appropriate questions to make sure that you dig a little bit in that, because that's been a concern sometimes, that all of a sudden you realize that they've signed a second buyer representation agreement, and you don't want to be in that position if you're the second person, for sure. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. So from episode 3, the brokerage to brokerage forms, a question that we see, with respect to keeping agreements between brokerages out of the agreement of purchase and sale. If, as a listing broker, I see such a clause, should I strike it even if I agree with it?
That was a good question when we got it during the episode. And I mean, really, we find members practice and trade very differently around the province. OREA and the forms team don't direct members in their trading. However, we do state as a best practice that the agreement of purchase and sale is an agreement between the buyer and the seller. It's best to keep all brokerage and consumer issues separated.
Yeah, if I can add on to that just a little bit, bang on there. I totally agree with you, Kelly. Clarity for anything. It could be the initial agreement, it could be the service agreement, it could be brokerage referral agreement, whatever it is. It needs to be absolutely clear in advance between the parties. And now this may be brokerage to brokerage, and I'm just going to extend it a little bit. It could be the brokerage and their consumer where they have a special agreement and they manage it separate and apart from the agreement of purchase and sale. The agreement of purchase and sale is between the buyer and seller, which sometimes the gray area is that there's reminders, such as in the confirmation, cooperation, representation. So you don't necessarily want to put a disclosure, and I'm just going to go a little bit outside of this, but you don't want to put a disclosure about a registrant being the sister of the seller in the agreement. You may put a reminder in the confirmation of cooperation, representation, but you wouldn't put it in the agreement. That's not a buyer-seller. So you get clarity in advance, no matter who the agreements are between brokerage, consumer, and then deal with maybe something in the confirmation as a reminder. Definitely a huge issue, ongoing, and I don't think that's necessarily just prevailing 6 months. It's something I think the industry and the salespeople are always needing reminders about. So keep it out of the agreement if it's at all possible. But we'd never say you cannot, because people have certain practice methods, and they might actually put it in there as a reminder as well. Not what we would recommend as best practice, but it's something that. In the end, it's their trading, their documentation.
No, that sounds really great. So from episode 4, Forms for Negotiation and Sales, there was a live question asked. What should I do if I receive an email with a copy of accepted agreement 8 minutes before the irrevocable time in the offer and I cannot reach the seller to communicate acceptance? What does a person do in this situation?
Stress? I don't know. Would you agree, David Oikel?
A little bit, eh?
Yeah. You know what? The members are the conductors. And I could do this by train analogy. I could do it by horse and buggy analogy. The members need to take hold and control the situations. They are the professional in the middle for a reason. They need to understand the timing that is required for contact, for communication. I'm going to back this up just a little bit and start with something like contract law, where you need an offer, acceptance, and communication. And if you can't get to that communication part, then you simply won't have an agreement. You won't have a contract. So it may require you to go back to the beginning. Now, I know a lot of members don't like either considering that, and no matter what the stress is, of course, the negotiation just might be null and you got to start fresh. So, it's not something pleasant to think about. I would hope that rather than the question be, I got 8 minutes left, is how could I have avoided this? And I think you've got to allow for the time, again, in the beginning, as far as, do you know how to contact your sellers? You know what, if I was next to the sellers, if I was 2 minutes away, if I had a fact, and if my offer actually said I could give notice by email, 8 minutes is enough. But if I don't, then I may be, in some very dark, cloudy areas where I need to redo the agreement if I can't get to the communication component at the end before that irrevocable, or even in many cases, if I can add to that question, I think we discussed it as well in the episode, you've got a condition expiring and you got 8 minutes left. You need to make sure you get the communication of the fulfillment or the waiver. Otherwise, it just sort of disintegrates and you got to start fresh. So it's not the end of the world. It is just a little more harried. So I'll leave it at that. Really, the question should be, what could I do to avoid this?
Right.
Don't let things go all the way to the end. Not a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. And, in my brokerage, the training is that the email addresses need to be the ones that you're going to communicate the acceptance back to. And in multiple representation, you need to make sure that it's the buyer and seller's email addresses and not your own. So it's preparation, because once you get there and there's 8 minutes left, you've kind of missed the boat if you don't have the email addresses there. But it's a preparation, and I think we're all pretty good at that. But that's a great question to anticipate. Mm-hmm. So when is the series officially launching?
Well, September 23rd is our official first episode of season 1. It'll run every Thursday at 11 a.m. for 10 weeks throughout the fall.
Really looking forward to the series launching. So where can members go to sign up?
Registration is open. Sign up is available through OREA.com/the standard. And we look forward to as many members want to tune in as possible. If a member needs help registering, they can always reach out to us by email, standardforms@OREA.com. The team is approachable, eager to help members find whatever they're looking for, anything forms.
So outside of this new project, you're always busy. Your standard form team offers a lot of great resources to members. You have your AI chatbot, forms explained files, webinars. And so talk about some of those resources and how members can access them.
Well, David, just like the registration link for the standard series, all forms resources can be found through the Standard Forms landing page under the Member Services tab on OREA.com. Once there, members will be able to navigate easily by using the links on the left side of the page. So this would be where members can see, like you mentioned, the webinar recordings, the FAQ files, the OREA clause booklet, and also where they'll be able to find the summary of revisions file to be aware of annual and ongoing changes. This specific file, which is important to note, will be updated on December 1st for the 2022 updates. So just a quick note to the members, mark your calendars for December 1st to check out OREA.com.
We start in September telling them about December. Takes that long to get everybody. So thanks for that plug. Thanks for allowing us that plug.
So one of the things that I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about is the AI chatbot, and how many questions that you've received, you got answers to, and how members can use that, and how successful that's been. A little bit more on that would be terrific.
Mm-hmm. I gotta tell you, David, I really thought I could just photocopy myself 3.5 years ago when we started thinking of it. I thought I would just talk and the bot would learn, and that's not really artificial intelligence. That's kind of my ignorance on artificial intelligence, but I have grown like everybody does once you get amidst of it. You know what, the training data that we've entered, a lot about the forms, a lot about the forms resources, questions and answers. The bot is not intended to give members trading advice or legal advice. I know that we even have legal forum on OREA.com, but it's still, sort of directs them as to what to consider, what the legislation hones in on. So let me stick with our artificial intelligence. We have well over 20,000 training bits and bytes, I guess they call them. The training data just continues to grow. We're kind of hoping that we take it from sort of the infant stage to the toddler stage by the end of 2021. There is so much information that we also have, of course, resounding, you might want to contact the forms team, because sometimes the way members are asking a question, it's like they're talking to a human being, which of course I've even done in different types of artificial intelligence environments. So we're trying to help the members with, again, continuing their forms knowledge. being the forms expert, putting their fingertips within artificial intelligence on resources. So if they said something about the agreement of purchase and sale or a notice of fulfillment, the bot will tell it there is a tutorial, there is a forms explained, they'll even identify the general purpose of the form and things of that nature to help them understand, that they're not only getting some of the general information, but they've got many resources to click and shoot and the way they go to keep their knowledge expanded.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of answers to a lot of questions. So I'm excited about that.
Finally, I'd like to know one last piece of information you would want our listeners to know before we go, as we wrap up a very interesting chat.
I'd like to say, and I have said it many, many times, whether it's in person in the webinars, whether it's in outreach, having been a realtor, you can't take the realtor out of me after that long. I really believe the members are the biggest asset to the forums. We can be proud of the forums. We can continue to develop the forums. We can even tell people about how, they're going to help them. But until the members use them, until the members are the experts, we want them to be the expert on the forums. And we understand they are the biggest asset to the forums. They are their forums. So don't distribute them to the public. The whole thing is that they're intended to be used by members for their trading activity. And truly, I think at the end of the day, the forms and clauses, the team is eager to help enhance the members' forms knowledge. So that would sort of be my resounding last comment. Other than to reach out to us anytime, it's easy to remember, Standard Forms plural, standardforms@OREA.com, keeping in mind that we often try to pick up the phone and clarify if it's a trading question or if it's you got to talk to your broker of record question. But we're still happy to even put your fingertips on things like RICO Bulletin resources or GR resources if the question's kind of connected to two different areas of OREA. So ultimately trying to help build success in the real estate business for each member as they cross paths with us. Big message for a little question, but there you go.
We're really looking forward to this episode, the 10-part series. Cassandra and Kelly, thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to this series as well.
That was a great conversation with Cassandra and Kelly. Now, before we go, I want to remind you that all OREA members and their families have access to Lifeworks, a well-being solution that provides users with 24/7 access to counselors, specialists, and self-guided resources for dealing with all of life's moments. Visit OREA.com/Lifeworks for more information and to access the service. And finally, don't forget to check out realheart.ca to read the inspiring stories of realtors giving back to their communities and to share your story. That's realheart.ca. That's it for today. From OREA President David Oikel and myself, David Bastel, stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Visit OREA.com/podcast for more information, links, and a full list of our episodes to date. New episodes are out the second Tuesday of every month.